Once, Hollywood felt limitless. Every decade had its own heartbeat. Western duels, smoky noir bars, dancing teens, and monsters from the deep. Each genre told us who we were, what we feared, and what we dreamed of becoming. But time moves fast, and cinema forgets easily. Some genres didn't just fade, they vanished. The cowboy rode into the sunset and never came back. The detective dropped his last cigarette in the dark. Teenagers stopped dancing. Robots stopped dreaming. And a whole generation of stories disappeared, buried under reboots and franchises. Yet, somewhere, between VHS tapes and half-remembered theme songs, their ghosts still flicker. These films built Hollywood's golden age, then vanished without a trace. And today, they feel like messages from another world, whispering what we lost when stories stopped taking risks. So, let's rewind. Let's open the reel and bring them back, one genre at a time. These are 10 kinds of movies that once ruled the world, and then, almost overnight, disappeared forever. Number 10. The Western. There was a time when every movie smelled like gunpowder and dust. The Western wasn't just a film genre, it was a religion. It gave America its heroes, its villains, its mythology. A man on a horse, a gun at his side, the horizon endless. Justice came at sunsets, and every town had one last showdown. For decades, this was cinema's heartbeat. John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, Gary Cooper, they didn't play characters, they played symbols. Movies like High Noon, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, and Once Upon a Time in the West turned silence into poetry. The music of Ennio Morricone could raise an army of ghosts. But by the late 1970s, the frontier had closed. Not just in history, but in imagination. Audiences had changed. They'd seen Vietnam, Watergate, the collapse of old certainties. The clean line between good and evil started to blur, and the cowboy, once a moral compass, suddenly looked outdated. Directors tried to reinvent him. Sam Peckinpah drenched him in blood. Clint Eastwood made him guilty. Kevin Costner made him nostalgic. But it wasn't enough. The West no longer spoke to a modern world wired with cynicism. Occasionally, a film like Unforgiven, Django Unchained, or The Power of the Dog rides out of the desert, not as a revival, but a requiem. Each one feels like an obituary for the myths we once believed in. Because the Western wasn't really about the frontier, it was about the fantasy of control, that one man, one bullet, one moral choice could shape the world. When we lost faith in that fantasy, the cowboy lost his horse, and so the Western didn't die, it rode into legend. A shadow moving across an empty landscape, a genre that built Hollywood and then quietly buried it beneath the sand. And if you think that world was lonely, the next one was darker, a place where everyone had a secret, and the truth hid in the shadows. Number 9. Film noir. The lights dim, the city breathes. Rain hits the pavement like broken glass. A man in a trench coat walks alone, cigarette glowing like a confession. Welcome to the world of film noir, where everyone lies and even the truth wears lipstick. Born in the 1940s, noir was America's hangover after victory. The war was over, but something had cracked inside the human soul. Cameras turned away from heroes and pointed straight at sinners. Films like Double Indemnity, The Maltese Falcon, and Out of the Past made shadows speak louder than dialogue. Every frame was drenched in guilt. Every alley whispered betrayal. Women weren't angels, they were architects of doom. Men weren't saviors, they were walking mistakes. Noir was a mirror that showed what polite society tried to hide. The directors were poets of despair. Billy Wilder, Fritz Lang, Orson Welles, men who painted darkness like a religion. Their movies taught audiences that life wasn't fair and justice was just another con. But by the 1960s, the smoke started to clear. Color invaded the screen. Audiences wanted optimism, laughter, escape. The world had enough real corruption, it didn't need more on film. So noir slipped quietly into the shadows it had created. Its DNA, though, never died. You can still find it in Chinatown, Blade Runner, LA Confidential, neon versions of the same despair. Modern directors call it neo-noir, but the heart is the same. beautiful people making terrible decisions under flickering lights. What made film noir unforgettable wasn't its violence, it was its honesty. It understood that good and evil don't live on opposite sides of the street. They share an apartment, split the rent, and sleep in the same bed. And maybe that's why we still look back. Because every time we step into the dark, we wonder, are we the detective or the suspect? If you thought that was bleak, the next genre tried to dance its way out of heartbreak, one song at a time. Number 8. The teen angst musical. Before Rebellion had guitars, it had choreography. Before Teenage Heartbreak went viral, it was sung under neon lights. The teen angst musical was the sound of growing up. Too loud, too dramatic, too honest to stay quiet. In the 1980s, these films were electric confessions. Footloose, Flashdance, Fame, Dirty Dancing. Every one of them turned insecurity into rhythm. They weren't just stories about love and freedom, they were cinematic diary entries of a generation that wanted to feel everything all at once. Every emotion was a performance, every mistake had a melody. If you didn't fit in, you danced it out. Directors like Herbert Ross and Adrian Lyne filled their frames with sweat, color, and hope. The actors Kevin Bacon, Jennifer Beals, Patrick Swayze became symbols of motion itself. They made dancing look like survival. The stage wasn't just a floor, it was a confession booth. But then the music stopped. The 1990s came. Cynical, ironic, too self-aware to dance. Grunge killed glitter. MTV turned rebellion into marketing. The sincerity of the teen angst musical couldn't survive in a decade that feared vulnerability. Audiences didn't want to feel exposed, they wanted to look cool. Hollywood tried to reboot it. Center Stage, Save the Last Dance, High School Musical, all echoes of something that once burned brighter. But what the originals had was danger. In Dirty Dancing, class and rebellion were real. In Fame, success came with scars. By the time the remakes arrived, the fire had been replaced by filters. Still, the rhythm never really died. Every TikTok dance, every teen drama soundtrack carries a faint echo of those movie dreams, the idea that emotion itself could move your body. And maybe that's why we keep coming back, because even when the world stops dancing, the music doesn't. The teen angst musical was the heartbeat of adolescence, pure, clumsy, and loud enough to wake the dead. It didn't fade because we stopped caring. It faded because we grew up. And if you thought that was emotional, the next genre blew up the world, literally. Number 7. The disaster film. Before superheroes saved the world, Hollywood loved to destroy it. Earthquakes, tidal waves, burning skyscrapers, the disaster film was chaos in widescreen, a spectacle of survival, fear, and collective awe. From the late 1960s to the end of the 1970s, the end of the world was big business. It started with Airport in 1970. One plane, one problem, 1,000 screaming passengers. Then came the Poseidon Adventure, flipping a luxury liner upside down, and the Towering Inferno, where Paul Newman and Steve McQueen fought fire with pure charisma. Each new release tried to top the last in scale, in panic, in human suffering rendered cinematic. What made these films powerful wasn't just destruction, it was empathy. They gave us ordinary people in impossible situations. Priests losing faith, mothers carrying children through smoke, strangers learning compassion as the walls came down. In a world haunted by the Cold War and environmental anxiety, these movies turned fear into catharsis. They let us watch the worst happen and still believe in survival. But by the 1980s, the formula collapsed under its own rubble. The audience had seen every explosion. They'd stopped caring who lived or died. Then Star Wars arrived, and destruction got a new face. Fast, shiny, futuristic. The slow realism of earthquake or avalanche felt ancient next to lightsabers and hyperspace. The disaster genre tried to rise again in the 1990s with Twister, Armageddon, Deep Impact. But something was missing. The intimacy, the sincerity, the human chaos. Now, the destruction was digital, weightless, bloodless. The spectacle grew louder, but the fear grew quiet. Yet, in the ruins of it all, there's something strangely beautiful. Those old disaster films were about fragility, the thin line between order and collapse. They reminded us that the world can fall apart, but people can hold together. In their noise, there was meaning. In their destruction, there was grace. The disaster film didn't die. It evolved into every blockbuster that flattens a city. But it lost its soul when the pain stopped feeling real. And if you think that was terrifying, the next genre imagined a future where even reality was falling apart. Number 6. Cyberpunk sci-fi. Before the internet was real, movies already feared it. Cyberpunk sci-fi didn't imagine a future full of hope. It imagined a future that had already failed. Neon cities, endless rain, humans wired into machines. It was beauty soaked in decay, rebellion wrapped in circuits. The genre exploded in the 1980s. Blade Runner, Akira, Tron, Ghost in the Shell, visions of a world where technology advanced faster than morality. Every skyline was beautiful and poisonous. Every human was half ghost, half data. Cyberpunk didn't sell dreams, it sold nightmares wrapped in neon light. Ridley Scott's Blade Runner wasn't about robots, it was about what it means to feel. Mamoru Oshii's Ghost in the Shell wasn't about hacking, it was about losing your soul in a digital sea. These films turned philosophy into hardware, the loneliness of progress made visible. The look was unforgettable. Trench coats, holograms, synthetic voices. Vangelis scores hummed like machine prayers, and under it all, the same question echoed. When everything becomes artificial, what's left to call human? But then came the 2000s. Real technology caught up. We didn't need movies to imagine the digital prison. We built it ourselves. The internet, smartphones, social media. The cyberpunk prophecy came true, and the fantasy evaporated. Once reality turned cyber, fiction couldn't compete. Hollywood tried to reboot the dream. The Matrix Resurrections, Ghost in the Shell remake, Altered Carbon, but the rebellion felt designed by committee. The danger was gone, the mystery was gone. We'd traded dystopia for convenience. Still, those old films haven't aged. They've arrived every time we scroll. Every time we feed data into the void, we step deeper into the world they warned us about. Cyberpunk didn't predict the future, it built the blueprints, and maybe that's why it vanished, because it won. The genre burned bright, then burned out, leaving behind a single flickering truth. The future didn't end up neon, it ended up real. And if you think machines made life complicated, wait until you see what faith used to look like on a 50-foot screen. Number 5. The epic biblical film. Before superheroes, gods already ruled the big screen. Before Marvel built universes, Hollywood built heavens. The epic biblical film was faith turned into spectacle. Miracles, plagues, deserts, and divine fury, all rendered in glorious technicolor. In the 1950s and early 60s, religion wasn't just preached, it was projected. The Ten Commandments, Ben-Hur, The Robe, Quo Vadis. Stories so massive they needed orchestras to hold their weight. Directors like Cecil B. DeMille treated the Bible as myth and blockbuster all at once. Every scene shimmered with symbolism and sweat. Sandstorms, crowns, chariots. Redemption painted across an impossible canvas. Audiences didn't just watch these films, they worshipped them. For a few hours, the movie theater became a cathedral. People came to see miracles, and Hollywood delivered them. Part faith, part fireworks. The morality was clear, the drama eternal. Sin, sacrifice, salvation. And when Charlton Heston parted the Red Sea, belief itself seemed possible again. But faith on film is fragile. By the late 1960s, the culture shifted. Vietnam, civil rights, assassinations. The world lost its appetite for divine certainty. The saints felt too pure, the miracles too polished. Audiences wanted ambiguity, not commandments. The era of blind devotion gave way to doubt. Then came the fall. DeMille was gone, Rome wasn't burning, and box office miracles turned into box office bombs. When the greatest story ever told arrived in 1965, it felt less like revelation and more like repetition. Even God couldn't compete with Easy Rider. Modern attempts, The Passion of the Christ, Noir, Exodus, Gods and Kings, recapture the spectacle but not the spirit. They look grand but they feel hollow, as if faith has been replaced by CGI thunder. The old epics believed, even in their excess. They meant every word. Today, we film miracles without conviction. The biblical epic wasn't just about religion. It was about the human need to believe in something larger. Justice, destiny, redemption. It gave us the sense that stories could save souls. And maybe that's why it disappeared. Because somewhere along the way we stopped needing God in cinemas. We started looking for him in ourselves. And if you think heaven was dramatic, the next genre took tragedy straight to the heart. No miracles, no gods, just raw emotion. Number 4. The romantic melodrama. Before love stories became hashtags, they were hurricanes. Before dating apps and ironic comedies, romance was a matter of life and death. The romantic melodrama turned emotion into art and art into ache. It was beautiful, painful, and unapologetically sincere. In the 1950s and 60s, audiences didn't just watch love, they felt it. Films like All That Heaven Allows, Imitation of Life, and An Affair to Remember were cinematic confessionals. Every glance carried a lifetime. Every line of dialogue was a wound disguised as poetry. Directors like Douglas Sirk and David Lean understood that love was never simple. It was war fought in whispers. Technicolor became emotion's weapon. The reds bled passion, the blues whispered loss. Women in silk dresses stood at windows, framed by rain, torn between duty and desire. Men were brave enough to break, to cry, to lose everything. The audience wept openly because the films gave them permission to. Then the 1970s came and irony took over. New Hollywood wanted realism, not romance. Love was messy, cynical, political. The sincerity of the melodrama suddenly looked naive. Tears became embarrassing. The heart was no longer cinematic. It was private. Studios tried to keep the magic alive. The Way We Were, Somewhere in Time, Ghost. But each felt like a ghost of an older feeling. Modern romance became cooler, cleverer, less dangerous. The idea that love could destroy you became outdated, or worse, uncool. But something irreplaceable vanished with it. The romantic melodrama didn't apologize for feeling too much. It believed that emotion was strength, not weakness, that beauty could be tragic and tragedy could be beautiful. It taught generations that to love deeply was to live completely, even if it broke you. And now, in an age of cynicism, those films play like echoes from a more human time. Their tears still shimmer, their heartbreaks still matter, because deep down, we all miss a world where love was allowed to be big. And if that kind of heartbreak feels old-fashioned, the next genre laughed at tragedy, turned chaos into charm, and made the impossible romantic. Number 3. The screwball comedy. Before romantic comedies had formulas, they had chaos. Before love became predictable, it was a duel, sharp, fast, and hilarious. The screwball comedy was Hollywood's wildest dance. Men and women trading insults, schemes, and affections at the speed of lightning. It was romance disguised as war, and everyone was armed with wit. Born in the Great Depression, these films offered escape without losing bite. The world was collapsing, but the dialogue sparkled. Movies like It Happened One Night, Bringing Up Baby and His Girl Friday turned banter into art. A reporter chasing a runaway heiress, a paleontologist losing control of a leopard, absurdity was the point. In a time when money and hope were scarce, laughter became rebellion. The secret weapon was rhythm. Every line snapped like jazz. The men were arrogant, the women sharper. Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant, Claudette Colbert, they made arguing look romantic. These weren't damsels and heroes, they were equals in the ring, fighting for control and falling in love because of it. Directors like Howard Hawks and Frank Capra understood that comedy was just tension in disguise. The faster the words, the deeper the longing. The chaos wasn't nonsense, it was code. A screwball romance was never about who won the argument, it was about who surrendered first. But by the 1950s, the magic began to fade. Society changed, gender roles hardened. The rapid-fire equality of screwball dialogue no longer fit a culture obsessed with order. And when television arrived, the rhythm broke. Sitcoms borrowed the jokes but lost the danger. The verbal duels became friendly, not flirtatious. Later attempts, Moonlighting, When Harry Met Sally, The Hudsucker Proxy, captured pieces of it, but never the same frenzy. The improvisational madness was gone, replaced by polish and predictability. Screwball had thrived on the chaos of a world that didn't make sense, and when life started making too much sense, it died. Still, the echoes remain. Every modern rom-com owes it a debt. Every witty argument, every enemies to lovers trope. The genre didn't just make people laugh, it made intelligence sexy. And maybe that's why it vanished, because it demanded something audiences forgot how to give: attention. And if wordplay could spark romance, the next genre brought pure adrenaline. When monsters ruled the drive-in, and fear was fun. Number 2, the creature feature. Once upon a midnight matinee, fear was fun. Before horror became psychological, before blockbusters had capes, America screamed together at monsters. The creature feature was the heartbeat of 1950s sci-fi terror. Cheap, loud, radioactive, and weirdly human. It didn't just scare people, it taught them what they were afraid of. The atomic age had just begun and imagination went nuclear. Mutant ants the size of trucks, sea creatures rising from glowing depths, aliens with perfect hair and terrible motives. Movies like Them, The Blob, The Day the Earth Stood Still, and Invasion of the Body Snatchers filled theaters with popcorn, panic, and wonder. Behind every monster, there was a metaphor: radiation, communism, progress itself. When science leaped ahead faster than morality, the screen became a warning label. The monsters weren't elegant, they were earnest. Rubber suits, model cities, screaming extras. But that was the charm. Audiences didn't laugh at the effects, they believed in the fear. Kids hid behind drive-in speakers, parents held hands, and for 90 minutes the world felt thrillingly doomed. Directors like Don Siegel and Jack Arnold weren't just making creature flicks, they were sketching Cold War anxiety in pulp colors. Even Japan joined the conversation with Godzilla, a walking allegory for nuclear guilt. Every stomp was a memory of Hiroshima, every roar was a sermon about power without conscience. By the 1970s, the monsters mutated again. Jaws gave terror teeth, realistic, predatory, primal. And when Steven Spielberg's shark bit the box office, the old rubber creatures couldn't compete. The innocence of fear was gone. Special effects got better, but the magic got smaller. The modern monster still stalks our screens, Jurassic Park, Cloverfield, The Mist, but the genre that birthed them lives on only in grainy black and white. Those old films remind us of a time when fear was collective, not algorithmic.
When people gathered in the dark, not to feel safe, but to feel alive. The creature feature was never really about monsters. It was about us, our arrogance, our curiosity, our beautiful stupidity. And maybe that's why we can't stop resurrecting them, because nothing reflects humanity better than something trying to eat it. And if that sounds bleak, the final genre turned music, rhythm, and rebellion into one unforgettable fever dream, the kind Hollywood could never replicate.
Number 1.
The erotic thriller. Before streaming turned desire into content, movies made it dangerous. The erotic thriller was Hollywood's last grown-up genre, seductive, intelligent, and fatally self-aware. It wasn't just about sex, it was about control, lust as power, pleasure as weapon. And once, it ruled the 1990s like a fever dream. Films like Basic Instinct, Fatal Attraction, Body Heat, and Sliver turned intimacy into chess. These stories were slick, stylish, and soaked in paranoia. The lighting was soft, the danger sharp. Everyone was beautiful and no one was safe. Directors like Paul Verhoeven and Adrian Lyne filmed human desire as something volatile, not romantic but radioactive. Audiences were addicted. After decades of moral restraint, these films cracked open the repression of the Reagan era. For the first time, Hollywood admitted what it had always known, that sex sells best when mixed with guilt and murder. Michael Douglas became the face of temptation and consequence. Glenn Close, Sharon Stone, Kathleen Turner, they turned seduction into vengeance, beauty into threat. But by the early 2000s, the genre collapsed. The internet made eroticism instant, effortless, empty. Why wait for a 2-hour slow burn when temptation was a click away? The mystery that made those movies electric, the unseen, the unspoken, vanished. Desire became digital, fear became formulaic, and the last adult genre drowned in the flood of accessibility. Attempts to revive it, Unfaithful, Gone Girl, Deep Water, had the surface but not the soul. The danger was gone, replaced by self-conscious cool. You can't shock an audience that's seen everything. The erotic thriller needed repression to thrive, and repression no longer exists. Yet, when you re-watch them, they still hypnotize. The slow pacing, the analog tension, the way a glance could kill. They remind us that the scariest thing isn't violence or monsters, it's intimacy. It's the moment you realize the person you love might be your undoing. The erotic thriller was the last gasp of cinematic adulthood. Bold, flawed, intoxicating. It didn't die because it failed, it died because it told the truth. We desire danger more than we admit, and when that became too honest, Hollywood looked away.
Cinema used to dream in color, and sometimes it dreamed too hard.
These 10 genres weren't just trends, they were reflections of who we were, what we feared, what we wanted to believe. Cowboys and detectives, dancers and monsters, lovers and liars. Each one burned bright, then vanished. Not because they failed, but because we changed. Hollywood moves fast, audiences grow restless, but film is memory, and memories never die. They linger in late-night channels, scratch DVDs, and random YouTube uploads that feel like time capsules. Every forgotten genre waits quietly, hoping for one more spotlight, one more heartbeat. Maybe they'll return, maybe not, but if they taught us anything, it's that stories never disappear. They just evolve. They hide inside new costumes, waiting to be rediscovered by someone who still remembers how to feel. So which world do you miss most? The deserts, the shadows, the songs, or the sins? Because somewhere out there, in the flicker of a projector, they're still alive, waiting for us to hit play again.